The galactic classification of habitable planets has 13 categories. Most civilized species evolve on Class 3 or Class 4 worlds. Mild temperatures, gentle weather patterns, limited tectonic activity, negligible background radiation. You know, the kind of places where survival of the fittest means who's best at interpretive dance or photosynthesis. And then there's Earth. Earth sits alone at the bottom of the chart as the only known Class 13 Deathworld. A planet so absurdly hostile that most galactic species need environmental suits just to survive the crushing gravity and toxic oxygen concentrations. A place where the native flora and fauna have evolved such aggressive survival mechanisms that the entire ecosystem resembles a planetary gladiatorial arena. This brings us to Cadet Maxine Max Ripley, who was currently sweating her ass off in the United Galactic Academy's orientation hall. Remember to breathe slowly, the medical officer had advised before Max entered. Your respiratory efficiency is approximately 340% higher than galactic standard. You might accidentally hyperventilate everyone else in the room. Max nodded and entered the massive chamber where hundreds of alien cadets from across the galaxy mingled. The gravity was set to a compromise level that left her feeling buoyant while still crushing some of the more delicate species. She'd spent the past 3 months in adaptive training, but this was her first real interaction with the galactic community. The conversations around her hushed as she walked through the crowd. A ripple of movement followed her progress as beings shifted away, their evolutionary instincts screaming danger. Max had been briefed about this reaction, but experiencing it firsthand was another matter entirely. "Ah, the Deathworlder arrives," announced a voice through the translator pinned to her collar. A tall, willowy alien with bioluminescent patches glided toward her. "I am Orientation Coordinator Vels. We've been waiting for you. Sorry I'm late," Max replied, consciously controlling her volume. "The adaptive gravity in my quarters malfunctioned, and I accidentally broke the repair drone." Vels's eye membranes flickered rapidly. "Yes, well, your species does have a tendency toward physical solutions." Someone in the crowd whispered. "I heard they drink dihydrogen monoxide for hydration." "Voluntarily," another added with a sound that Max's translator identified as horrified laughter. Max felt her cheeks burn. Great first impression. 3 minutes in and she was already the scary Deathworld freak. She squared her shoulders, determination setting in. She hadn't worked her ass off to get into the academy just to be dismissed as a primitive curiosity. "Where should I register?" she asked Vels. "Combat Division, I assume." Vels's tendrils curled in what appeared to be amusement. "Science track, actually. Xenobiology." The coordinator's bioluminescence dimmed in surprise. "Fascinating choice. Your orientation package is available on Terminal 7. Do try not to damage it. The interface is sensitive to excessive pressure." As Vels glided away, Max heard the whispers continue. "A Deathworlder scientist. That's like having a supernova perform delicate surgery. I give her a week before she accidentally kills someone." Max gritted her teeth and headed for Terminal 7. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to prove that humans belonged among the stars, even if the stars seemed determined to treat her like a barely contained disaster. Little did they know that barely contained disaster was humanity's default setting, and sometimes that was exactly what the universe needed. The United Galactic Academy sprawled across an artificial satellite orbiting the neutral planet Thalassia Prime. Designed to accommodate species from every habitable classification, the Academy was a marvel of environmental engineering, with separate atmospheric zones and gravity wells that shifted depending on who walked through them. For Max, those first weeks were an exercise in restraint. Every door required a feather-light touch. Every conversation meant monitoring her volume. Every casual movement had to be calculated to avoid startling classmates who evolved on worlds where the most dangerous predator was equivalent to an annoyed hamster. On her 14th day, Max entered the Comparative Survival Strategies lecture hall. The tiered seating arranged in a semicircle had been assigned based on atmospheric needs, which meant Max sat alone in the high oxygen tolerance section. She'd taken to arriving early to avoid the uncomfortable stares as she walked past her classmates. "Cadet Ripley," boomed a voice from the center of the hall. "Perhaps you could enlighten us on why you're segregating yourself from the learning community." Lieutenant Commander Zorax stood at the lectern, 4 arms folded across his exoskeletal chest. His species, the Vexori, evolved on a mid-range gravity world with a rigid caste system that they'd exported to every corner of the galaxy they touched. Zorax had made his disdain for Earth's chaotic evolutionary path clear from day one. "I'm in my assigned seat, sir," Max replied, keeping her voice even. "Indeed, and yet you arrive 15 minutes early to avoid interacting with your fellow cadets." Zorax's mandibles clicked in what Max had learned was amusement. One might think a Deathworlder would show more courage. Snickers rippled through the hall as other cadets filed in. The barb stung, but Max had dealt with worse. She'd survived Earth's education system after all. I was reviewing the assigned materials, sir, she said, holding up her datapad. Chapter 17 contains several inaccuracies about Earth's predator response tactics that I wanted to discuss. Zorax's compound eyes narrowed. Inaccuracies. The text was written by Professor Glyph himself. Yes, sir, but it suggests humans develop tool use primarily as a distance combat strategy. That's not entirely accurate. Thank you, Cadet. Zorax interrupted. Your primitive planet's developmental quirks are not the focus of today's session. From 2 sections over, a melodic voice called out, I'd like to hear the Deathworlder's perspective, Commander. Max turned to see Cadet Talara, a Larishan whose translucent skin revealed the gentle flow of amber fluids through her circulatory system. Larishans were famous for their diplomatic skills, having evolved on a world with minimal resources where cooperation was the only survival strategy. That's very charitable of you, Cadet Talara, said another voice, silky and condescending. Always adopting the hopeless cases. The speaker was Cadet Kixeel, scion of the Tezerian Trade Consortium that controlled commerce in 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. His scale-feathered crest rose slightly, a display of dominance that his species couldn't seem to suppress even in professional settings. Some of us, Kixeel continued, question the wisdom of admitting species that evolved through such primitive means as physical competition. The consortium believes cognitive superiority is the true marker of advanced civilization. Fascinating perspective, Max replied before she could stop herself. Especially coming from a species that needed to purchase their interstellar drive technology because they couldn't figure out basic quantum mechanics. The lecture hall went silent. Kixeel's crest flattened against his skull, a sign of embarrassment or rage. Max couldn't remember which. Probably both. Lieutenant Commander Zorax slammed one of his 4 hands on the lectern. Enough. Cadet Ripley, this aggressive behavior precisely illustrates why Deathworlders struggle with galactic integration. Max opened her mouth to defend herself, then thought better of it. She'd been warned about this. Humans' tendency to respond to social challenges was often misinterpreted by species that used rigid hierarchies or chemical signaling for conflict resolution. My apologies, Commander, she said. And to you, Cadet Kixeel. Kixeel's crest remained flat. Apology noted, though perhaps physical aggression is simply your nature. One cannot blame a primitive species for acting according to its evolutionary constraints. Before Max could respond, diplomatically or otherwise, the door at the rear of the hall slid open, and the room's atmosphere changed instantly. Every cadet straightened in their seat as Professor Glyph entered. Unlike most academy instructors, Glyph belonged to one of the oldest species in the galaxy, the Athati. Rumored to have achieved spaceflight when humans were still figuring out fire, the Athati were few in number but respected throughout civilized space. Professor Glyph moved with the fluid grace of his species, 8 limbs synchronized in perfect harmony, as he made his way to the center of the hall. I see we're having our usual cross-cultural exchanges, Glyph observed, his voice resonating through the translator with a richness that artificial systems rarely achieved. His large, multifaceted eyes swept the room before settling on Max. Cadet Ripley, I understand you have concerns about my text. Max felt her face flush. Not concerns exactly, Professor. Just observations based on Earth's historical record. Excellent. The day I write something that cannot be improved upon is the day I should retire. Glyph gestured with 2 of his upper limbs. Please share your perspective. For the next 7 minutes, Max carefully explained how human tool development had been driven as much by environmental adaptation as by predator avoidance. Glyph listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions that showed genuine interest rather than the dismissive tolerance she'd encountered from other instructors. Fascinating distinction, Glyph said when she finished. Would you be willing to provide reference materials from your planet's anthropological archives? I'd like to update the next edition. Max blinked in surprise. Of course, Professor. Wonderful. Now to today's lecture. Glyph activated the holographic display in the center of the room. We will be discussing survival strategies across various evolutionary pathways, which is particularly relevant to your upcoming field exercise. The display shifted to show a rugged mountainous landscape. This is Krios, a Class 7 world with moderately challenging conditions. In 3 standard cycles, all first-year cadets will participate in a survival training mission on its surface. Murmurs filled the hall, excitement from some, apprehension from others. Teams will be randomly assigned, Glyph continued. You will navigate from drop point to extraction zone using only basic equipment and the skills you've developed in this course. Kixeel's crest rose again. Professor, will accommodations be made for different planetary classifications? Some species are naturally more equipped for survival challenges. His gaze slid meaningfully toward Max. An excellent question, Cadet Kixeel, Glyph replied. And the answer is no. Galactic service often requires operating outside one's comfort zone. This exercise is designed to build collaboration across physiological differences. After class, as Max gathered her materials, she noticed Cadet Tellara approaching. Up close, the Larishan was even more ethereal, her movements so fluid they seemed almost underwater. Your insights were fascinating, Tellara said. Most species avoid discussing their evolutionary paths so openly. Max shrugged. Humans don't have much choice. Our biology isn't exactly subtle. Perhaps that's why I find your species intriguing. You've embraced your nature rather than denying it. Telara's translator conveyed a sound like delicate chimes, her species equivalent of laughter. I hope we're assigned to the same team for the Krios exercise. Maybe, Max replied, surprised by the friendly overture. Though I'm not sure how much help I'll be. This survival course is my lowest grade so far. Your lowest grade? But you're from a Deathworld. Yeah, that's the irony. The course is all about conserving energy and avoiding confrontation, basically the opposite of how humans survived Earth. According to Academy standards, everything we do is wrong. Perhaps not wrong, came Professor Glyph's voice from behind them. Simply different. The galaxy has room for many paths, Cadet Ripley. Max turned, startled. The professor had approached without making a sound, a reminder that ancient species often had abilities that defied their apparent physical limitations. The Krios exercise, Glyph continued, will be challenging for every participant. But challenges reveal capabilities we didn't know we possessed. His multifaceted eyes glimmered. I suspect your classmates might learn something unexpected about Earth's survival strategies. After Glyph departed, Tellara touched Max's arm lightly, a significant gesture of trust from a species as physically vulnerable as the Larishans. He's right, you know, Tellara said, and Lieutenant Commander Zorax is wrong. About what? About Deathworlders struggling with galactic integration. Tellara's skin rippled with patterns that expressed emotions beyond what the translator could convey. Sometimes the galaxy needs perspectives from those who faced real danger. My people have a saying, gentle waters wear away stone over eons, but torrents reshape landscapes in moments. Max wasn't entirely sure what that meant, but it sounded encouraging. As she watched Tellara glide away, she noticed Kixeel observing them from across the hall, his crest fully extended in what she now recognized as a threat display. The Krios exercise suddenly felt like much more than just another academy test. It was an opportunity to show what humans could offer to galactic society, if she could survive both the planet and her classmates' expectations. The academy transport ship broke through Krios's cloud layer, buffeted by atmospheric turbulence that had half the cadets clutching their harnesses. Max, by contrast, found the descent pleasantly reminiscent of Earth's commercial air travel, minus the crying babies and mysteriously sticky tray tables. By the cosmic void, groaned Kixel from across the aisle, his scale feathers flattened against his skull. How can primitive species travel like this regularly? Max bit back a sarcastic response. The past week had been a crash course in diplomacy as team assignments were announced. Of course, because the universe had a twisted sense of humor, she'd been grouped with both Kixel and Tellara, along with a methane-breathing Dovan named Gruzzle, whose communication primarily consisted of odor emissions that the translators struggled to interpret. Lieutenant Commander Zorax stood at the front of the transport, his exoskeleton modified with additional plating for the harsher Kriosian environment. Cadets, listen carefully. Krios is a Class 7 world with significant environmental challenges. Your objective is to navigate from the drop point to the extraction zone within 3 planetary cycles, approximately 38 standard hours. The ship's view screen displayed a topographical map showing their route, a 23-kilometer journey through mountain passes, dense vegetation zones and what appeared to be a dried riverbed. Each team will receive basic survival equipment, emergency beacons for genuine life-threatening situations only, and coordinates for the extraction point. Zorax's mandibles clicked emphatically. This is not a race. The objective is efficient resource management and threat avoidance. Max studied the map, noting several alternative routes that might provide better cover or access to water sources. Earth survival training had taught her to prioritize water, shelter and defensible positions, though the academy course emphasized energy conservation above all else. One final note, Zorax continued. Krios is home to several predatory species, including the Kriosian slasher. These apex predators rarely approach groups, but remain vigilant and report any sightings immediately. The transport shuddered as landing gear deployed. Moments later, they touched down in a clearing surrounded by towering vegetation with iridescent purple leaves that swayed despite the absence of wind. Sentient plant life, Max whispered to Talara as they prepared to disembark. Semi-sentient, Talara replied. They respond to bioelectrical fields but lack true consciousness. Fascinating organisms. Teams exited the transport in sequence, each receiving equipment packs calibrated to their physiological needs. When Max's team stepped onto Kriosian soil, she immediately noted the differences from Earth. Slightly lower gravity, higher oxygen content, and a distinctive mineral smell that reminded her of thunderstorms. Team 7, Zorex announced, handing them their equipment. Your designated route is Eastern Quadrant. Extraction coordinates are programmed into your navigational unit. He fixed Max with his compound eyes. Remember, Cadet Ripley, avoidance, not confrontation. Yes sir, Max replied, shouldering her pack. Avoidance is our priority. As the teams dispersed, Max's group moved toward the edge of the clearing. Kixil immediately claimed the navigational unit, his crest rising in a dominance display. As the most experienced in celestial positioning, I will handle navigation, he declared. Gruzzle emitted a puff of methane that the translator interpreted as objection. Trading species orientation, typically commerce-based, suggest alternative leadership. I've studied the topography, Max offered. Maybe we should discuss route options before heading out. Kixil's inner eyelids flickered dismissively. The Academy route is clearly optimal. It was designed by experts in xenogeography. Yes, but look at this section here. Max pointed to where the route crossed the dried riverbed. This would funnel us through a narrow passage that could be problematic if what? If we encounter your imaginary dangers. Kixil interrupted. This isn't your Deathworld, Ripley. Not everything is trying to kill you here. Talara's skin rippled with concern patterns. Perhaps we should consider multiple perspectives. Unity and diversity is the foundation of galactic cooperation. Max suppressed a sigh. This was going to be a long 38 hours. They set off along the Academy's designated path, with Kixil leading and Max bringing up the rear. The terrain was initially manageable. Rolling hills covered in the strange purple vegetation that recoiled slightly whenever they passed too close. Max kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, her Earth instincts automatically cataloging potential threats and resources. 3 hours into their journey, they encountered their first challenge. The path descended steeply into a ravine before climbing the opposite side, a difficult traverse, even in the lighter gravity. The navigational unit indicates this is the correct route, Kixil stated, though his confident tone had diminished as he peered down the slope. Gruzzle emitted a complex series of odors that translated roughly as descent hazardous, energy expenditure excessive, alternative path query. Max had already noticed a less steep route that followed the ravine's edge before gradually descending. We could try that way, she suggested, pointing to the alternative path. It would take longer, but might be safer. The Academy route was chosen for optimal efficiency, Kixil insisted, though less emphatically than before. Talara moved to the edge, her translucent skin pulsing with stress patterns. I'm uncertain my physiology is suited for such a descent. My homeworld has no significant elevation changes. Before they could decide, a distant sound echoed through the valley, something between a roar and a metallic screech. All 4 cadets froze. What was that? Talara whispered, her skin now almost transparent with fear. Probably just atmospheric phenomena, Kixil said, but his crest had flattened against his skull. Max shook her head. That was biological. Some kind of vocalizing creature. Gruzzle's methane sacs inflated and contracted rapidly. Predator sound patterns. Kriosian slasher probability. Elevated. It's miles away, Kixil declared, though he was now scanning the horizon nervously. We should proceed quickly. The sound came again, closer this time. Max felt a familiar sensation, the heightened awareness that humans experienced in dangerous situations. Her senses sharpened, adrenaline preparing her body for rapid response. While her teammates showed signs of stress, Max experienced an odd sense of clarity. We need cover, she said calmly. That ravine is too exposed. Let's follow the ridgeline, where we'll have better visibility and more escape options. The Academy route, Kixil began automatically. Will get us killed, Max interrupted. Look, I understand this isn't a death world, but predators follow similar patterns across ecosystems. If that's a slasher, it's hunting, and open spaces make us targets. Another screech echoed, definitely closer. Talara's skin had gone completely transparent, a Lauritian panic response that would have been fascinating under different circumstances. I vote for Ripley's plan, she said, her melodic voice trembling slightly. Gruzzle emitted a pungent agreement. Even Kixil seemed to recognize the shifting priorities. Very well, he conceded. But I'm noting this deviation in the mission log. They moved quickly along the ridge, with Max now taking point. She kept their pace steady but sustainable, watching for signs of pursuit while identifying potential defensive positions. The sounds continued intermittently, seeming to track parallel to their route. As they rounded a bend in the ridge path, they encountered another Academy team huddled behind a rock formation. Two Vesperati hovering nervously above a Graxian, whose 7 legs were curled in a defensive posture, and a Megorian, whose crystalline structure was vibrating with stress. Cadet Ripley, one of the Vesperati called, clearly surprised. Why are you up here? The route goes through the valley. We heard something, Max explained. Possibly a slasher. The Graxian uncurled slightly. We heard it too. Our emergency beacon isn't working. We've been trying to contact the transport for extraction. Max felt her stomach tighten. If the beacons weren't working, something was interfering with communications, either natural phenomena or deliberate intervention. Neither option was reassuring. Have you seen any instructors? She asked. Lieutenant Commander Zorax passed through about 20 minutes ago, the Megorian replied, crystalline voice chiming with anxiety. He said to maintain position while he investigated. Max scanned the surrounding terrain. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. Soon they'd be dealing with unfamiliar nocturnal conditions on top of potential predators. We should combine forces, she suggested. Find defensible shelter for the night. Negative, said Kixil. Academy protocols state each team must complete the exercise independently. Before Max could respond, the sound came again, much closer and followed by a commotion from the valley below. Voices shouted in alarm, and Max rushed to the ridge edge to look down. In the gathering dusk, she could make out several figures running chaotically across the valley floor. Behind them, moving with terrifying speed, were 3 massive shapes, quadrupedal predators with elongated limbs, and what appeared to be reflective plating along their backs. Slashers, whispered one of the Vesperati. They're hunting another team. As they watched in horror, one of the fleeing cadets stumbled. The lead slasher pounced with impossible speed, its front limbs extending what looked like bladed appendages, the source of their name. The cadet's scream cut through the air. An emergency flare shot into the sky from somewhere in the valley, the universal distress signal. But no immediate response came from the transport or Academy staff. The gravity of their situation hit Max with crystalline clarity. This wasn't just a training exercise anymore. Something had gone very wrong, and 8 cadets from various worlds with minimal survival training were now facing actual life-threatening danger. And based on the expressions of her companions, she was the only one who didn't find this completely terrifying. The Creosian slashers were nightmare fuel made manifest. 3 meters of pure evolutionary perfection with 6 limbs, 4 for running and 2 specialized forelimbs ending in serrated bony protrusions that gave the species its name. Their skin was covered in reflective scales that fractured light, creating a disorienting visual effect as they moved. Most disturbingly, they displayed coordinated pack behavior that spoke of intelligence far beyond typical apex predators. We need to move, Max said, pulling the others away from the ridge. Those cadets' distress signal should trigger an extraction, but until help arrives, we need to find a defensible position. The Megorian's crystalline structure vibrated in what the translator interpreted as hysterical laughter. Defensible, against those. Did you see how fast they move? I saw, Max replied calmly. But they have weaknesses. All predators do. Kixil's crest flattened completely against his skull. This exercise has clearly been compromised. We should activate all emergency beacons immediately. Already tried, one of the Vesperati said, wings buzzing with anxiety. Something's blocking the signal. Max had suspected as much. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to think methodically. On Earth, she would have strategies for various predator encounters. Bears, mountain lions, aggressive moose. The slashers were alien, but certain principles would apply. Listen up, she said, her voice carrying the natural authority that came from someone who wasn't panicking. First, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Those creatures hunt by sight and movement. Their reflective scales suggest they evolved in bright conditions, which means they might have poor night vision. Gruzzle emitted a thoughtful odor. Logical analysis. Nocturnal adaptation unlikely with reflective evolutionary traits. Second, Max continued, they're fast but bulky. Difficult terrain would slow them down. And third, They're hunting as a pack, which means they're communicating somehow. The Graxian uncurled slightly. I detected vibrations before they appeared. Possible subsonic communication. Max nodded. Good observation. That helps. She scanned their surroundings, quickly formulating a plan. There's a rock formation about half a kilometer north with a narrow approach. We can fortify it for the night while waiting for extraction. And if extraction doesn't come? Telara asked, her voice barely audible. Then we adapt, Max replied simply. That's what survival is. They moved quickly, staying beneath the tree line where possible. Max organized them into a formation with the physically vulnerable species in the center. Night was falling rapidly now, and Krios had no moon to provide illumination. Soon they were navigating by the bioluminescent glow of certain plants, and Telara's naturally luminescent skin, which she couldn't fully suppress despite her attempts. I'm sorry, she whispered to Max. My species evolved in symbiosis with light-feeding organisms. I can't stop the reaction completely. Don't apologize, Max said. It might actually help us. If those predators do have poor night vision, they'll focus on the strongest light source. 20 minutes later, they reached the rock formation Max had spotted. A cluster of massive boulders pushed together in what might have been an ancient landslide. There was indeed a single narrow approach, with the rest protected by sheer rock faces. Perfect, Max said. Kixil, Gruzzle, help me move some of these smaller rocks to create a partial barrier. Telara, can you and the Vesperati look for anything we might use as torches? The Megorian's crystalline structure might reflect light effectively. For once, no one argued with her instructions. The immediate threat had overridden academic hierarchies and species prejudices. They worked quickly, reinforcing their position as best they could with available materials. As they finished, a distant scream echoed across the landscape. Everyone froze. That came from the direction of the original drop point, said one of the Vesperati. Could it be Lieutenant Commander Zorax? Possibly, Max said. Which means we might be on our own until morning. She checked their supplies. Enough food and water for everyone for one day. Basic medical equipment, and some emergency thermal blankets. Not ideal, but workable. She'd just finished organizing watch shifts when the first slasher appeared at the edge of the clearing, its scales reflecting the bioluminescent plant light in hypnotic patterns. It moved with predatory grace, testing the air with a forked sensory appendage that extended from its cranial ridge. Nobody move, Max whispered. It's scanning for prey markers, movement, sound, possibly biochemical signatures. The creature paused, its head swiveling toward their position. For a moment, Max thought it might pass them by. Then Kixil's communication device emitted a soft beep as its automated system tried once again to connect with the Academy network. The slasher's head snapped in their direction, 6 golden eyes narrowing as it focused on their hiding spot. It emitted a low, resonant call that seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath them. It's alerting the pack, Max said, still maintaining a calm tone despite the surge of adrenaline. Everyone get behind the barrier. Now. They scrambled into position as 2 more slashers emerged from the tree line, flanking the first in a classic predator formation. Max quickly assessed their options. The barrier they'd built would slow the creatures down but not stop them. They needed a way to deter the attack altogether. Telara, Max said quietly, can you increase your bioluminescence? Telara's skin pulsed with anxiety patterns. Yes, but why would I make myself more visible to predators? Trust me. And everyone else, cover your eyes when I tell you. Max rummaged through the medical kit, and found what she needed, a small laser scalpel used for emergency field procedures. She motioned the Megorian closer. Your crystalline structure, can it refract light? The Megorian's translator conveyed confusion, but understanding dawned quickly. Yes, my people evolved to scatter harmful radiation. You want me to amplify the light? Exactly. On my signal, Telara will flare her luminescence. I'll activate the scalpel at maximum setting, and you'll refract it through your outer facets. The combined flash should overwhelm their visual receptors, especially if they're adapted for low-light hunting. The slashers were approaching cautiously now, testing the barrier with their bladed forelimbs. The leader was less than 10 meters away, its golden eyes fixed on Telara's gently glowing form. Ready, Max said, positioning the Megorian. 3, 2, 1, now. Everyone else. Eyes closed. Telara's skin erupted in brilliant blue-white light, just as Max activated the scalpel. The Megorian's body captured the combined illumination and fractured it into thousands of piercing beams that swept across the clearing like a disco ball from hell. The effect on the slashers was immediate and dramatic. All 3 creatures reared back, emitting high-pitched shrieks as their sensitive eyes were overwhelmed by the sudden light assault. They thrashed blindly, slashing at the air with their bladed limbs. "It's working," Kixel exclaimed. "They're retreating." But Max knew better. Temporarily stunned, not retreating. "We need something else to drive them away. Gruzzle, your methane sacs. Can you release a controlled amount?" Gruzzle's translator conveyed alarm. "Methane combustible with sufficient ignition source." "Exactly," Max confirmed. "We create a controlled perimeter burn using your methane and the scalpel. Not enough to create a forest fire. Just enough to establish a scent and heat barrier they won't want to cross." The Dovin hesitated only briefly before understanding the logic. "Will position downwind. Require ignition coordination." The slashers were recovering now, shaking their heads and beginning to circle more cautiously. Max directed Gruzzle to release small puffs of methane along the clearing's edge while she prepared the scalpel. "Everyone stay back," she warned. "Telara, be ready with another light burst if they charge." With careful timing, Max ignited Gruzzle's methane releases, creating a series of controlled flames that quickly established a semicircular perimeter in front of their position. The slashers hissed and backed away from the flames, clearly adverse to the heat and smell. For several tense minutes, the predators tested different approaches, looking for weaknesses in their defense. But the combination of fire, periodic light flashes, and the increasingly confident postures of the cadets eventually convinced the pack to seek easier prey. With final warning shrieks, they disappeared back into the forest. As the immediate danger passed, Max realized everyone was staring at her. "What?" she asked, already scanning the perimeter for signs the slashers might return. "You didn't even seem scared," one of the Vesperati said, wings finally stilling from their anxious buzz. Max shrugged. "Being scared doesn't help you survive. Taking action does." "Is Earth really so dangerous that this is normal for you?" Telara asked, her skin still pulsing with residual stress patterns. "This specific situation, no. But adapting to threats is basic human education." Max started reorganizing their supplies. "We should maintain watches through the night. 2-person shifts, 2-hour rotations." As the group settled in, Kixel approached Max with an uncharacteristically subdued demeanor, his crest neither raised in dominance nor flattened in submission. "Your approach contrasted significantly with Academy protocols," he said carefully. Max braced for criticism. The situation required adaptation. "Indeed." Kixel paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "The consortium's assessment of Deathworld evolutionary paths may require revision." Coming from a Tezarian, this was practically groveling. Max offered a small nod of acknowledgement, and they established an uneasy truce born of shared danger. The night passed in tense vigilance. Twice they heard slashers calling in the distance, but their defensive perimeter held. As dawn approached, Max was standing watch with Telara when a new sound reached them, the distinctive hum of Academy transport engines. "Extraction team?" Telara asked hopefully. "Maybe," Max replied, "or maybe someone else entirely." Before she could elaborate, a figure stumbled into the clearing from the direction of the valley, Lieutenant Commander Zorax. One of his 4 arms hung uselessly at his side, green ichor seeping from what appeared to be slash wounds across his exoskeleton. "Commander," Max called, rushing to assist him while maintaining awareness of their surroundings. Zorax's compound eyes focused on her with obvious surprise. "Cadet Ripley, how did your team survive the night?" "Deathworld tactics, sir," she replied, helping him toward their shelter. "What happened? Where's the extraction team?" Zorax's mandibles clicked in pain as she examined his wounds. Atmospheric disturbance prevented communications. The exercise was compromised when containment protocols for the slasher research facility failed. "Research facility," Kixel interjected, now fully awake. "You brought cadets to a planet with an active predator research installation. The facility was supposed to be on the opposite continent," Zorax admitted. "Something must have gone catastrophically wrong." He focused again on Max. "How did you deter the slashers?" "They've been attacking every team systematically." Max briefly explained their defensive strategy while applying medical sealant to Zorax's wounds. The commander listened with increasing attention. "Fascinating," he said when she finished. "Using their evolutionary adaptations against them. Not standard Academy protocol at all." "No sir," Max agreed. "But effective." A transport appeared on the horizon, moving rapidly in their direction. Zorax activated his emergency beacon, which was now functioning again.
The atmospheric interference appears to be clearing, he observed. Extraction teams will be recovering all cadets. As the transport drew closer, Max felt an unexpected emotion, disappointment. The exercise had been terrifying, dangerous, and completely outside Academy parameters. But for the first time since arriving at the United Galactic Academy, she hadn't felt like an outsider. She'd been in her element, doing what humans did best, adapting to survive. The transport landed at the edge of the clearing, its doors opening to reveal a medical team and several armed security officers. And standing in their midst, observing the scene with his multifaceted eyes, was Professor Glyph.
Status report, Commander Zorax. Professor Glyph inquired as the medical team rushed toward the injured instructor. 3 teams unaccounted for. Communications compromised. The slashers have demonstrated unprecedented coordinated hunting behavior, Zorax replied between labored breaths. Professor Glyph's attention shifted to Max. And yet these cadets survived. Fascinating. Before anyone could respond, the transport's communications officer called out. Professor, emergency signal from Team 3. They're trapped in the eastern ravine with wounded. Extraction impossible with current atmospheric conditions. Team 3. Tellera's skin flashed with distress patterns. That's Nixala's team. She's from my home cluster. Glyph's expression remained unreadable as he addressed the security team. Time estimate to reach them. At least 40 minutes, sir. The ravine terrain is too unstable for direct transport access. Max stepped forward. Sir, I believe I can help. All eyes turned to her, the Deathworlder voluntarily inserting herself into danger. The slashers hunt by patterns, Max explained. I've observed enough to predict their movements, and I know a faster route through the terrain. Gulazi's crest rose slightly. We know a faster route, he corrected. Our team has relevant experience now. Glyph considered them for precisely 3 seconds. Proceed. Lieutenant Vorka will accompany you with emergency medical supplies. As the rescue team prepared, Lieutenant Commander Zorax grabbed Max's arm with his uninjured limb. Cadet Ripley, standard Academy protocols will not be effective. Max nodded. I know, sir. We'll improvise. 10 minutes later, Max led her makeshift rescue team through the forest, taking a path that hugged the ridgeline. Lieutenant Vorka, a stocky reptilian with military augmentations, watched her with professional curiosity. You move like someone who expects attack, he observed. On Earth that's just called hiking, Max replied. They reached a vantage point overlooking the ravine where Team 3 was trapped. 3 slashers circled the narrow ledge where 4 cadets huddled, one clearly injured. The predators had them perfectly cornered. The only escape route was a sheer cliff face. Direct assault inadvisable, Gruzzle's translator interpreted his complex methane emission. Predators hold tactical advantage. Then we change the dynamics, Max said, her mind already formulating a plan. Tellera, you'll be our main distraction. Lieutenant, those sonics on your belt, what frequency range? Standard riot dispersal, 85 to 120 decibels, Vorka replied. Why? The slashers communicate using subsonic vibrations. We need to disrupt that. Max quickly organized her team. Gulaziz has excellent depth perception. When I give the signal, you'll need to target this rock formation precisely. For once the Tezarian didn't argue. I can hit a trading vessel's exhaust port at 400 meters. A stationary target is trivial. Max nodded. Good, because we only get one shot. She laid out her plan quickly. It was reckless, improvised, and completely against every Academy safety protocol. It was also their best chance at saving Team 3. Questions? Max asked when she finished. Tellera's skin rippled with nervous patterns. This plan seems improbable. Welcome to human survival strategies, Max replied with a grim smile. Improbable is our specialty. They moved into position. Max caught the eye of one of the trapped cadets, and made a subtle gesture to prepare them. Then she nodded to Tellera. The Larishan stepped into view, her skin flaring with brilliant bioluminescence. The slashers immediately swiveled toward this new prey, momentarily confused by its sudden appearance. Now, Max ordered. Lieutenant Vorka activated his sonic device at maximum output, while Kixil launched a targeted projectile at the precarious rock formation Max had identified. The combination of disruptive sound waves and precision impact triggered exactly what Max had predicted. A controlled landslide that cut directly across the slasher's position.
The predators scattered in confusion as rocks tumbled between them and their original prey. In that moment of chaos, Max and Gruzzle rushed toward Team 3, while the slashers were disoriented. "Move," Max shouted to the trapped cadets. "Follow our exact path." The rescue was messy, dangerous, and at several points nearly disastrous. The injured cadet, a Merovian with delicate tendrils, required 2 carriers. One slasher nearly intercepted them at a narrow pass, only to be driven back by a precisely timed methane burst from Gruzzle. When they finally reached the extraction point where the transport waited, Professor Glyph stood observing with an expression that might have been approval. "Unorthodox methodology," he noted as they rushed the injured cadets aboard, "but undeniably effective." Max, breathing hard from the exertion, merely nodded. She was already scanning for the next problem to solve. "The other teams," she asked, "found and extracted?" Glyph replied, "You were the last group outstanding." He studied her with ancient multifaceted eyes. "The Academy has trained cadets for 7 centuries, Cadet Ripley. In that time we have encountered many species with unique survival adaptations. But rarely have I observed such creative problem-solving under pressure." As the transport lifted off, leaving the chaos of Krios behind, Max finally allowed herself to relax. Around her, cadets from various worlds watched her with expressions ranging from awe to recalculation. Even Kixil's usual superiority had been replaced by something resembling respect. Lieutenant Commander Zorax, now stabilized by the medical team, beckoned her over. "Cadet Ripley," he said, mandibles clicking softly. "It appears I may have misconceptualized the application of Deathworld evolutionary strategies in crisis scenarios." From Zorax, this was practically a standing ovation. "Thank you, sir," Max replied, "but I couldn't have done it without the team. Every species contributed unique capabilities." Zorax's compound eyes studied her thoughtfully. "Perhaps that is the most important lesson, Cadet. The galaxy needs both your human adaptability and our established protocols. Neither is sufficient alone." As the transport accelerated toward the Academy, Max felt something shift in her understanding of her place in the galactic community. Perhaps being from a death world wasn't a liability after all. Perhaps it was exactly what the galaxy sometimes needed.
3 weeks after the Krios incident, the United Galactic Academy's central lecture hall buzzed with conversation. The survival training exercise, now infamously known as the Slasher Scenario, had become legendary among the cadet corps. Max entered the hall and noticed something different immediately. Instead of clearing a path around her, several cadets nodded in acknowledgement. A Vesperati even gave a respectful wing flutter. "Cadet Ripley," Tellara called, her skin pulsing with greeting patterns. "We saved you a seat." Max joined Tellara, Gruzzle and, surprisingly, Kixil, whose crest extended in a modest display of sociable recognition rather than dominance. "The committee's findings are being announced today," Kixil informed her. "Rumor suggests significant curricular adjustments." Before Max could respond, Professor Glyph entered the hall, accompanied by Lieutenant Commander Zorax and several Academy officials. The room quieted immediately. Following the events on Krios, Glyph began, "The Academy has re-evaluated its approach to survival training and emergency protocols. While our traditional methodologies remain valuable, recent events demonstrated clear gaps in our preparation for multi-species crisis response." Zorax stepped forward, his exoskeleton now bearing decorative inlays where his injuries had healed. "Effective immediately, the Academy is creating a new course track, Adaptive Crisis Response. This curriculum will incorporate diverse evolutionary approaches to survival scenarios, with special emphasis on cross-species collaboration under extreme conditions." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Max sat perfectly still, hardly believing what she was hearing. "Furthermore," Glyph continued, "we have selected a cadet whose actions during the Krios incident exemplified the principles this new program will teach. Cadet Maxine Ripley will serve as teaching assistant for the inaugural course." All eyes turned toward Max. She felt her face flush. Humans and their visible emotional responses. After the announcement, cadets crowded around Max with questions and congratulations. As the crowd thinned, Professor Glyph approached her. "A moment, Cadet Ripley." Max followed the professor to a quiet corner of the hall. "You seem surprised by your appointment," Glyph observed. "I am, sir. When I arrived, most instructors considered Deathworld tactics too aggressive for galactic service." Glyph's multifaceted eyes glimmered. "The galaxy is vast and unpredictable, Cadet. Sometimes theoretical knowledge must yield to practical experience. Your species has survived conditions that would extinguish most civilizations. We're just stubborn, sir. Perhaps." Or perhaps adaptability is the most valuable trait in an uncertain universe. Glyph gestured toward where Tellara, Gruzzle and Kixil waited. You've already begun building bridges between evolutionary approaches. That may prove more important than any technical skill we could teach. Later that evening, Max entered the Academy's recreation center to find a crowd gathered around a holographic display. Cadets from a dozen worlds watched in fascination as the screen showed what appeared to be Earth survival programming. "Is that human really wrestling with a scaled Earth predator?" asked a Merovian cadet. "That's Steve Irwin," Max explained. "He was a conservationist who..." interrupted several voices as the next clip began. "Humans free climbing sheer cliff faces without safety equipment. Incomprehensible," muttered a Vixari cadet. "Why would evolved sentience deliberately seek danger?" Max smiled. "That's just how we learn our limits." Kixil, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. "The consortium has officially requested expanded trade relations with Earth." His crest rose slightly. "Your species possesses unique problem-solving capabilities that may have commercial applications." "High praise from a Tezarian," Max replied with a small bow. As she watched her fellow cadets studying human behaviors with new appreciation, Max felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced since arriving at the Academy. The Deathworlder label remained, but its meaning had transformed from liability to asset. Professor Glyph appeared at her side, observing the scene with ancient eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. "You know, Cadet Ripley," he said quietly. "There's an old Athadai saying evolution provides many paths to sentience, but adversity provides the most interesting travelers." Max grinned. "So basically, what doesn't kill you makes you a more entertaining dinner guest." "Precisely." Glyph's expression shifted to what Max had learned was amusement. "And speaking of interesting journeys, I'm leading an expedition to examine anomalous energy readings on the ice moon Tarvos next semester. We could use someone with unconventional problem-solving abilities." "Sounds dangerous," Max replied. "Undoubtedly." "I'm in." As Glyph departed, Max turned back to watch her fellow cadets, who were now bombarding Tellara with questions about the Deathworlder's methods. The Lyrishan caught Max's eye, and her skin flashed with friendly patterns that needed no translation. Maybe this was what humanity's role in the galaxy would be, not just surviving, but teaching others how to face the unexpected. In a universe full of cosmic horrors and unpredictable dangers, perhaps what the galactic community needed most was a species crazy enough to stare into the abyss and say, "Watch this."